Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name's Megs, or Megan, or Spooky, whichever you want to call me, and this is Spooky History with Megs. Talk about part 4 in my Bonnie and Clyde series that I've started a while back. Just been really slow with getting content out because I want to make sure I get every little piece of information I can find on the internet. We'll have links posted in the description box below, so feel free to check them out. I ran across some videos and all that jazz, so that will be down there. Let's get into it. Blanche Barrow was born as Miss Benny Iva Caldwell in Garvin, Oklahoma. She was the only child of parents Matthew Fontaine Caldwell and Lillian Bell Pond. At her birth, her father was 39 years old and her mother was 15 years old. Her parents ended up divorcing when she was a young child. She ended up living with her father. Her father basically raised her, all that good stuff, right? Her father was a logger and a farmer. He was also devoutly a Christian man, religious man. He would preach I guess part-time as a minister. Growing up, Blanche didn't have a relationship with her mother. She was arranged to marry a gentleman that was much older than her at the age of 17, and his name was John Calloway. Starting on the day of November 11th, 1929 is when her life had changed forever. She met Buck Barrow while hiding from her husband down in Dallas, Texas. As you know, in my last video, Buck wasn't a huge prize or anything like that to be married to because of his criminal background history. When they met, he was sentenced to 5 years following a burglary located in Denton, Texas. And then on March 8th of 1930, he managed to escape, and she ended up hiding with him up until she finally talked him into hey, turn yourself in, it's not worth it. And then just 2 short years later, he was released, and later he was put on a pardon, which in turn cleared his conviction completely. Anything he did back then was off of his record, off of everything. Remember in the last video we discussed that Buck went with his brother. Bonnie and Clyde came rolling up, hey, come with us, we're gonna go somewhere, blah blah blah. So they picked up Buck. They called it a vacation in Joplin, Missouri. It was no normal vacation. It was a way for Bonnie and Clyde to be kind of on the run and to keep hiding out, all that good stuff. Blanche, at first, she kind of refused to go many times because she didn't want her husband, of course, to fall in line with more criminal activity. It was not good. She was like, no, I don't want to go. Eventually, somehow she got talked into going because Buck said the key thing. I'm not listening to what you're saying. I don't care what you say. I'm going to go. Things of that nature. So she finally was like, okay, fine. I'll go with you with Bonnie and Clyde just to make sure you are okay. And she in turn went with Buck, Bonnie, and Clyde. Buck told Blanche kind of hey, my intention is just to tell my brother to turn himself in so he can get the same treatment as I did. I got cleared of my convictions. Maybe I can talk Clyde. Maybe this vacation is good for us. I can talk Clyde into bettering himself and stuff like that as his, as his older brother, or as his brother in general. After they agreed to go with Bonnie and Clyde, the first stop was Joplin, Missouri, at the Callahan. It is now called the Oak Ridge Drive-In, and it still exists today. It's somewhere in Joplin, Missouri. I'm not going to disclose the entire location, but it fronts 34th Street and is registered as the National Registry of Historic Places. This building had a 2-car garage. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful place, and it's still standing today. You can actually go and tour this place. You can actually see all of the little gadgets. They'll tell you, like, you know, the little things that Clyde and Bonnie used to do, and you know, while the Barrow Gang was still there. You know, it's a very great historical site. One of the many places I actually want to visit, because you can get hands-on, like making it feel like you're going back in time into like a little time capsule. So in this apartment, Blanche spent about 3 weeks kind of relaxing, chilling out. Everything was quiet, everything was peaceful. Her and Bonnie even went out shopping for like food, and they went to the movies. They, you know, they just had a girl time. And even though she wasn't too fond of Bonnie and Clyde, she sucked it up. You know, she was the loyal wife, things of that nature. One day, while they were having some drunken fun, playing card games and whatnot, you know, just doing what everybody else, you know, that is grown, and, you know, how they party and stuff like that. That's what they were doing until a gunshot. I don't know what Clyde was doing. Maybe he got a little too rowdy and he was like, you know what, I'm gonna clean my gun up. Bow. You know, like, we don't know. I don't know. It's not clear of how the gun fired off by accident. So then, in turn, a whole gun war had started between the police and the Barrow Gang. 2 of the policemen were shot and killed, and Blanche was put into a getaway car, and then they sped off to another destination. Blanche spent a total of 4 months with the Barrow Gang. This is where, like, kind of she was associated with the Barrow Gang. Undeveloped pictures were found in this place. Her and Buck's marriage license was found in this place. This is when she says she saw all of her hopes and dreams just tumbling down. At this point, I know she felt like, you know, she made a huge mistake of going with Buck, but she wanted to protect her husband. On July 18th, 1933, the gang stopped for the night at the Red Crown Tourist Court. It was attached to the Red Crown Tavern. I'm pretty sure you can see in a lot of tourist documentaries, historical documentaries. This is very, very familiar. It was in Platte City, Missouri. This place was where the police would eat during the day and compare notes on local crime that was happening. And they quickly started getting attracted to kind of like the Barrow Gang. They attracted the attention of an officer by the name of N.D. Hauser. Blanche was wearing jodhpur pants, unusually tight and provocative, when any pants were considered daring for a woman to wear in that era. She paid $4 rental in coins. He also saw Clyde kind of back his car into the court's garage, a habit associated with criminals preparing for fast getaways. Suspicions grew high when she stated she rented for 3 people, but in turn was ordering takeout for at least 5 servings of food per day. This particular officer was also the owner of the tavern, which he had a right to suspicion. He investigated the car that Clyde had driven, and turns out it was stolen. It had Oklahoma license plate tags on it, and it was established as it being identified as the criminals. So that's how they figured out Clyde, Bonnie, Buck, Blanche, all them were there. Clyde also had a young man with him, about 17 years old. Because he's a minor, you guys can look it up for yourself of who that individual was. What Clyde would do, he would tape newspapers on the windows so that way nobody could see in, but he can only see out. At this point, he was unable to actually see out because he covered these windows. So growing police activity was around the tavern as various agencies formed an assault team. 1 a.m. on July 20th, 1933, Sheriff Coffey, leading the posse and bearing a steel bullet-proof shield, knocked on one of the gang's two cabin doors. He announced that he was the law enforcement, and Blanche's response of this knocking and carrying on and, hey, this is law enforcement, code word was, just a minute. It was code word to get all of your stuff together and get out of here. It was like their code word for it's the police. Another round of fire was shot off from Clyde himself against the police, and they made a run for it once again. Officers were wounded, so nobody was, the only thing they were was wounded. Nobody got killed in this activity here. Buck got the worst end of the stick. Blanche and Buck had to leave the cover of their cabin as it had no interior door leading to the garage, as did the cabin that occupied Clyde Barrow. Exposed, they were targeted by the posse's gunfire. Buck fell with a through and through, trigger warning, through and through wound entering his left temple, the bullet traveling the inner surface of the front portion of his skull and out of his right temple. Bonnie and Clyde stopped, and while under fire, they helped Blanche kind of drag Buck into the car and drove away under a barrage of gunfire, which shattered the car windows. Glass splinters went everywhere, penetrated and blinded Blanche's left eye and damaged her right. Little backstory on the apartments and tavern location is now covered by highway lanes approaching the Kansas City airport today. I think the buildings have now since been knocked down, but there is a little historic marker there. I can't remember what parking lot it was in, but there's like another business of some sort there, and you can actually pull up and read the history about it. After they got away, they eventually acquired another car, one without bullet holes, and they camped near an overgrown dead-end road near the abandoned Dexfield amusement park in Dexter, Iowa. Buck's injuries were too severe to permit them to leave, and within 4 days, they were spotted again and identified. The road covered a 50-member posse. Mainly, there were like townspeople armed with shotguns and hunting rifles. It was a mess. Approached the camp, and soon after, it was soon after dawn. Clyde and Jones, remember the kid I said that was with Clyde that was 17 years old? Yeah, him. Clyde and Jones opened fire, but were quickly outgunned and wounded. With their cars wrecked, they abandoned the stolen vehicle and fled on foot. During this tussle, Buck collapsed to his previous wounds. Blanche, who by this time had been wounded by shotgun pellets in the abdomen, stayed with him and was arrested. Hence why the photo, she was about a couple feet from him, and because of the shards of glass that hit her face, due to her impaired vision, she thought the camera that was taking the picture for, like the newspaper and everything was a gun, and she was going to get shot to her death and all that. Blanche and Buck were then taken to a doctor who asked Buck where he was wanted by the law. Buck, whose brain was protruding from the infected wound that would soon kill him, replied, "Everywhere I've been." The capture of Blanche and Buck distracted the posse, allowing the 3 remaining fugitives to cross the river, where they stole a car and made their escape. Blanche, who later testified that she accompanied the gang solely to be with her husband, apparently gave authorities no useful information. It was only in 1935 that she and other family members of Bonnie and Clyde were tried for harboring. She was sent to Platte County, Missouri. She was charged with attempting to murder Sheriff Holt Coffey during the Platte City shootout, despite the fact that he was wounded by the posse and not the Barrow Gang. Blanche found Coffey remarkably, sympathetic. He felt bad for her and stuff like that. I mean, come on now, she's going blind in one eye. What can you do? Later claimed that while interrogating her, a man by the name of J. Edgar Hoover had threatened to gouge her remaining good eye out of her head. Mind you, she never shot a gun. She never did anything. All she did was run. She did more of the flighting than the fighting, okay, when she was with the Barrow Gang for these 4 months. So while she was in prison, Blanche spent much of her time in her prison camp and the prison hospital, and she quickly befriended other inmates such as a woman by the name of Irene McCann and Edna Murray, also known as the Kissing Bandit. She practiced her photography skills She started writing her memoir and started her scrapbooks. In those scrapbooks, though, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about Miss Blanche Barrow. She kept many letters from boyfriends, but in which those relationships were short-lived. They weren't very long relationships. She eventually lost all sight in her eye, which required extensive treatment from the prison doctor. She also kept in touch with Officer Coffey and his family. Eventually, after 6 years, she was released on parole. Yay! After her release, which was in the year 1939, she moved to Oklahoma to take care of her father. On the other hand, her relationship with her mother had quickly deteriorated, eventually leading to a complete break. However, Blanche only stayed briefly in Oklahoma, moving to Dallas, Texas, working various jobs later that same year. In 1940, she was 29 years old. She married a 27-year-old gentleman by the name of Eddie Frazier. 1 year later, she completed her parole. However, police continued to monitor her whereabouts, and she often was contacted when arriving in a new city, new state, all that good stuff. Later life, she said Bonnie and Clyde seemed like characters in a book she had read. Blanche and her husband wanted children, but suffered from a number of miscarriages, and in 1965, they ended up adopting a 12-year-old little boy named Ricky. Blanche would have a complicated relationship with him as he grew older, especially after her husband had passed away due to cancer on November 5th, 1969. After her third husband's death, Blanche did not want to remarry. She didn't want to have anything else to do with being married, and she eventually died of lung cancer on December 25th, 1988. She was at the time age 77. She was buried in Dallas Grove Hill Memorial Park as Blanche B. Frazier. Her memoir is called My Life with Bonnie and Clyde and was published in 2004. Well, that is all I have for you as far as Blanche Barrow. If you found this video interesting, be sure to give it a like, leave a comment down below, and consider subscribing to my channel. I have many plans and projects going on in the background on this channel. More to see here. I try to go live every Saturday, but if I don't, I'll try to drop content so that way it kind of makes up for, not going live. Next up, I'm going to give you a short sneak peek. We will be discussing the ending results of Bonnie and Clyde. The part that ended it all, what closed up this chapter in history, and what ended the Barrow Gang, and also the tragic death of Bonnie and Clyde. Stay tuned, and until next time, I will see you later. Again, this is Spooky History with Megs. Have a good day, guys.